Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We are about 10 minutes away from starting, so we're just running a little bit late with the weather. If I could get everybody who's here to watch, if you guys could start taking some seats, because we're going to need to bring some seats in. Got more crowd than we expected this morning, so if you guys could start taking some seats, we'll bring seats in so everybody has a seat, and we'll start here in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Never been a sinner, I never sinned. I got a friend in Jesus. So you know that when I die, He's gonna set me up, the Spirit in the sky. Oh, set me up, the Spirit in the sky. That's where I'm gonna go when I die. When I die and they lay me to rest, I'm gonna go to the place that's the best. Go to the place that's the best. Been working so hard, I'm punching my card. 8 hours for work, oh tell me what I got. I've got this feeling that time's just holding me down. I'll hit the ceiling, or else I'll tear up this town. Now I gotta cut loose, put loose, kick off the Sunday shoes. Please, Louise, pull me up on my knees. Jack, get back, come on before we crack. Lose, don't lose, everybody cut for loose. You're playing so cool, obeying every rule. Dig away down in your heart, you're burning, yearning for somebody to tell you life ain't a passing you by. I'm trying to tell you in a way you don't even try. You can lie if you don't cut loose, put loose, kick off the Sunday shoes. Ooh-wee, Marie, shake, shake the Marie. Oh, my Lord, come on, let's go. Loose, you're loose, everybody cut for loose. Foot loose. twisting, turning further from my home. Young, like a new moon rising fierce through the rain and lightning, wandering out into this great unknown. And I don't want no one to cry, but tell them if I don't survive, I was born free. I was born free. I was born free. Born free. It's free like a river raging strong. Is the wind I'm facing, chasing dreams and racing Father Time. It's deep like the grandest canyon, wild. You can knock me down and watch me bleed, but you can't keep no chains on me. I was born free. I was born free. I was born free. Born free. And I'm not good at a long goodbye, but look down deep into my eyes. I was born free. Calm, facing danger, lost like an unknown stranger. Grateful for my time with no regrets. Close to my destination, tired, frail and aching, waiting patiently for the sun to set. And when it's done, believe that I will yell it from that mountain high. I was born free. I was born free. I was born free. Born free. And I will bow to the shining seas and celebrate God's grace on thee. I was born free. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 right outside of this one church town, there's a gold dirt road to a whole lot of nothing. Got a deed to the land, but it ain't my ground. This is God's country. We pray for rain and thank Him when it's falling, 'cause it brings a grain and a little bit of money. We put it back in the plate. I guess that's why they call it God's country. I saw the light in a sunrise, sitting back in a 40 on the muddy riverside, getting baptized in holy water and shine with the dogs running. Saved by the sound of a pin-found Dixie whistle in the wind that'll get you heaven bound. The devil went down to Georgia, but he didn't stick around.
place I end up in when it's my time. Lay me 6 feet deep in God's country. I saw the light in a sunrise, sitting back in the 40 on the muddy riverside, getting baptized in holy water and shine with the dogs running. Saved by the sound of a pin-found Dixie whistle in the wind that'll get you heaven bound. The devil went down to Georgia, but he didn't stick around. This is God's country. Yeah, I saw the light in a sunrise, sitting back in the 40 on the muddy riverside, getting baptized in holy water and shine with the dogs running. Saved by the sound of a pin-found Dixie whistle in the wind that'll get you heaven bound. The devil went down to Georgia, but he didn't stick around. This is God's country.
Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. We're a little late. Sorry this time because we've had a weather issue out there. I'm so impressed that you people are strong Iowans and you come out on a morning like this. Thank you. Thank you. It's good. All right, as we always start, every Northside Conservative, we start with a prayer and the pledge. And I'm going to introduce Governor. So, Pastor Todd Stouse from First Family Church to lead us in prayer. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen. It's the 12th, and so here's a verse from Proverbs 12. Verse 25 says that anxiety in a man's heart weighs it down, but a good word cheers it up. And I bet you know somebody today who needs a good word, don't you? Let's use that verse in our life today. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your perfect word, the Bible. Thank you for your living word, your Son, Jesus Christ. And Lord, I pray this today. We'll seek to obey this and we'll encourage those around us with a good word. Thank you, you've given us the ability to do this, an agency and a will, Lord, to pursue righteousness and help others. I pray, Lord, for our elected officials. As we hear from them this morning, this will be their aim to do good and speak words that encourage a flourishing in our society. These things we pray in the good and only name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Todd. As we do at all meetings, if we would please stand, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I was chatting with a lad this morning, and he said, "Did you ever think about canceling this?" I said, "Why?" This is Iowa. But as we do with every meeting, I just want to introduce our local elected officials. First of all, we have Todd Schaefer here from the City Council. Thank you, Todd. Our Mayor, Mark Holm. From the school board, we have Sarah Barthel and we have Joy Burke. Our state senator, Mike Buzolo. And pleased to have our two legislative candidates for Iowa. We have Heather Stevenson, Precinct 42, and Ryan Weldon from District 41. The Northside Conservative Club has been blessed all year in the fact that we have had a lot of candidates. We are also blessed in the fact that we see great leadership in this state. I was having a chat with my friend Steve Bohl, and I said, "Steve, gosh," I said, "sometimes I just don't know how they do it." And I've told this story before, and he says, "I tell you how they do it. It's called leadership." And we have been blessed in this state that for the last many years that we have had great leadership. We have a governor that stands for what's right, articulates her message, and really does a great job of representing our great state. So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Governor Kim Reynolds.
Oh, good morning. Pretty good energy for a frosty, snowy, wintry day in Iowa. I had somebody from out of state come up to me, I think it was from South Carolina, and said, "This weather is awesome." So anyway, I appreciate you being here. Just be safe out on the roads. We don't want anybody getting hurt, but thanks for being here. Thanks to the Northside Conservative Club. We appreciate you so much and all the support that you provide for elected Republican officials up and down the ticket. So thanks for all that you do in bringing people together and helping support good policy that's making a difference in this state. I just, on Tuesday, delivered my 7th condition of the state, which doesn't even seem possible to me. I mean, the years fly by, but I was really proud to be able to stand in front of Iowans again in the legislature and say that confidently the condition of our state is strong. So proud to be able to continue to do big things. You know, in Iowa, our fiscal health is strong. Our balances are good. We are going to continue to see we're continuing to see our economy grow, even despite significant challenges. We're cutting taxes and red tape. We're driving educational freedom and really investing in our kids and standing behind law enforcement and just really we're seeing the impact of collectively working with the legislature, the impact of Republican leadership, I think, is undeniable, not only in the state of Iowa, and the nation is paying attention. It turns out when you pass good policy and you get the results that we're getting, the nation is paying attention, and so we have an opportunity to continue taking advantage of that and let them know how we're going to continue to move this state forward. So, as Rick said, leadership does matter, not only here in Iowa, but I can tell you it matters in Florida as well. And this morning, I have the opportunity to not only introduce a good friend, a colleague, great dad and husband, and somebody that I have a lot of respect for, that I was proud to endorse, and that's Governor Ron DeSantis. You know, we got to know each other during COVID, and I'm telling you, some of us Republican governors were out there on an island, and it was certainly true for Ron. And I had so much respect for not only the courage, but the resolve that he had to bring experts to the table, to listen, to put his constituents first, and do the right thing under unbelievable pressure from not only the media, but from the administration. And I think, you know, as we look in hindsight, those were the right decisions, and we've seen really positive results because of that. So I have a lot of respect for him for that. The other thing I admire, too, I'm kind of a get-her-done, you know, governor. We want to, you know, I don't know slow. I'm like, well, you know, be thoughtful, make sure it's sustainable, but go big, go bold, and let's make a difference for the people that we serve. And we've certainly seen that from him down in Florida as well. He's got a phenomenal record. Go look at it. Followed through with 100% of what he said he would do. That's what we need, somebody that has a record that will step in on day one and execute and get this country back on track. So if you like what we're doing in Iowa, I can tell you, you're going to love what Ron's vision for this country. So please join me in welcoming next President of the United States, Governor Ron DeSantis.
Thank you. Good morning. Good to see you all. Thanks so much. Thanks to Governor Reynolds for the great introduction. Thanks for her endorsement. And most importantly, thanks to Governor Reynolds for being one of our nation's great governors. And you guys are very fortunate to have her and the leadership, as well as so many great legislators here in Iowa. In Florida, by the way, most Floridians don't come north in January. It's usually the opposite. I did look. Naples is a high of 78 today. And I know there are Iowans that are enjoying that right now, and most of the Midwest states as well. But I get an insight into what's going on in the country because when blue states do dumb things, I get more people move to Florida. Illinois, I know if like they elected that radical mayor, Naples real estate went up. New York, same thing. It affects Palm Beach, all these places. So I talk to the people that come from Illinois, California, New York, New Jersey, these places, not happy with what's going on there. When I run into the Iowans, you know, they like coming to Florida, but they're very happy with what's going on in Iowa, and they very much appreciate it. So you're lucky because that's actually rare now this day and age. Even a lot of our some of these Republicans are not following through with what they say either. The Democrats have done a horrible job. So you have Kim Reynolds, you have a great legislature, and you guys should be very, very feel fortunate for that. I'm really impressed that so many people came out given the weather. We are going to be, I'm going full speed ahead with whatever we have, but we want people to be safe. So if it's not safe, then we'll do. And I get that going forward. I do have our 5-year-old son is with us. A month ago, he had never even seen snow, and now he's in the midst of a blizzard. So I did promise him whenever we get a break in the action today, he's going to be able to do a snowball fight with me. So we're going to work on that and figure out where we can get that done and make it happen. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited that we're having the run up to the caucus. I think the choice is simple. Donald Trump's running for his issues. Haley's running on the donors' issues. I'm running on your issues. I'm running for your family. I'm running solely to turn this country around. I'm the only one running that has delivered on 100% of the promises that I made. These are things that people have been talking about for years as Republicans. They run on it and never deliver it. We delivered it across the board. I'm also the only one running who has actually beaten the left and the Democrats time and time again. You know, I'm sick of Republicans losing. You look at what's happening in Washington, another failed budget bill, massive increase in spending, not dealing with the border, all these things where they campaign one way and they don't do, and the Democrats always seem to win. It's like Lucy with the football. We think we're going to do and don't. In Florida, that's not how it worked. We beat the Democrats when it comes to things like election integrity. We have universal voter ID, no ballot harvesting. We beat the teachers' unions on universal school choice. We beat Fauci on COVID. The former president was here the other day doing a town hall, and he said he had nothing to do with Fauci. He said I was the one that was involved with Fauci. That is gaslighting. That is revisionist history. He elevated Fauci, turned the reins over to Fauci, and if it wasn't for governors like Kim and like me dragging this country out of lockdown, it would have been even worse. But those COVID policies were disastrous in this country. And so not only did we beat them in Florida, the state's never done better as a result of that. I'm the only one running for president. It's going to bring a reckoning to the federal government for what it did to this country during COVID. All those agencies are going to be held accountable because we can never let this happen to our country ever, ever again. We also beat the left by banning China from buying land in the state of Florida. No farmland, no land near military bases, none of that. We need to do that nationwide. So that's what we have to do. And oh, by the way, we came in as governor in a state that had usually been decided by 1 point, perfectly divided almost, 300,000 more Democrats than Republicans actually in the state of Florida. We led strongly and boldly and unapologetically. And what was the political result of that? We didn't win by 1 point or 40,000 votes. We won by 20 points and 1.5 million vote margin. People respond to leadership. When they see that you're willing to fight for them, and when they see that you're going to deliver results for them, they will come out in droves to support you. And that's the direction that we have to go. As president, we'll knock out a lot of these issues and deliver. I mean, look at what's happening with the border. They now are telling kids in New York City and Brooklyn, you can't go to school in person because the city's commandeering the school to house illegal aliens. You want to talk about putting the American people last? So Biden's let in 8 million people illegally, more coming every day. Now, I support doing the border wall, and I think had Donald Trump built that, Biden would not have been able to let in 8 million people. The wall's a physical fact of life. So we'll do that, but we're going to declare it to be a national emergency on day one. I'll have military assets as needed. When people come illegally, the sanction is that they get deported back to their home country. If you're not willing to do that, you're never going to stop this. In Florida, we have boats that try to come in illegally. Coast Guard's job is to stop it. They don't have enough assets, so I put our boats in there as state. We intercept, give the Coast Guard, and then they'll bring the people back to Haiti or Cuba or wherever. And guess what? When they see that that's going to happen, they don't even try to come in the same numbers because they know they're just likely going to end up back where they started. Well, it's the same thing with the border. If you come now, you just get across the border, they give you a piece of paper and say, come back in a court date in 5 years. I mean, like, that's not a deterrent at all. If you come and you go back, then that's that. And we're going to allow states to enforce immigration law and really have a force multiplier there. But I'm going to hold the Mexican drug cartels accountable because they're responsible for a lot of what's happening at the border, and they're responsible for killing tens of thousands of Americans every single year with fentanyl. And I've met people, having traveled all 99 counties in Iowa, I've met people who've been impacted by this, families that have lost loved ones, communities that have been affected. Every community's become a border community with respect to the fentanyl because it's everywhere. So you got to treat them as the foreign terrorist organizations that they are. I don't want to see a situation. I mean, parents now, they have a kid in college or something, they think like, well, they may take something at some party not knowing what it is. If it's laced with fentanyl, that could be a fatal poisoning and a death right there. So we cannot just sit there and shrug our shoulders anymore, which is what the people in D.C. do. So we will hold them accountable. We'll authorize the use of military force, and we're going to end the fentanyl problem in this country once and for all. I've got a lot more in the tank here, but I'd rather just answer your questions, and so I'm just going to end with this. I'm motivated to run partially because my wife and I have a first grader, a kindergartner, and a preschooler. And we're very concerned about what lies ahead for this country given its current trajectory. Right now, we're on a trajectory to be the first generation of Americans to leave to our kids and grandkids an America less prosperous and less free than the one we inherited. And if we were to do that, we'd be the first generation of Americans to ever leave America less prosperous than what we found, because people from the founding of this country, the present, always stood up and sacrificed so that future generations can be free. But I also am motivated because we owe a debt of gratitude to those prior generations. People have fought and sacrificed for this country. I used to take a trip when I go to Washington, fly into Washington, D.C. You can take a path going into Reagan Airport that would take you parallel to the National Mall. And so if you looked out the left side of the plane, you saw sweeping views of the Lincoln Memorial, the Reflecting Pool, the Washington Monument, all the great monuments and the U.S. Capitol building, and you felt a sense of pride as an American because those symbolize the ideals and principles that have made this country unique. But after doing that trip a few times, I realized, the best monuments to this country is not found on the National Mall. All you had to do was look out the other side of the plane. Because if you looked out the right side of the plane, you looked over the Potomac River, you saw a series of small, nondescript monuments orderly arranged over the rolling hills of a place called Arlington National Cemetery. And it occurred to me then, and I believe now, you can have the best Constitution in the world, you can have the best Declaration of Independence in the world. These things do not run on autopilot. They require every generation of Americans to step up and defend freedom when it's threatened, and sometimes put on a uniform, risk your life, and even give the last full measure of devotion for service to this country. Now, in this political season, we're not called upon to make sacrifices of that nature, but what we are called upon to do is to do justice to those sacrifices. What we are called upon to do is to preserve what George Washington called the sacred fire of liberty. This is the fire that burned in Independence Hall in 1776 when 56 men pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to establish a new nation conceived in liberty. It's a fire that burned at a cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, when our nation's first Republican president pledged this nation to a new birth of freedom. It's a fire that burned on the beaches of Normandy when a merry band of brothers stormed the shores, defeated the Nazis, and preserved liberty throughout the world. It's a fire that burned at the foot of the Berlin Wall in 1987 when a resolute Republican president stood in front of that wall and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," eventually leading to the Soviet Union's destruction. This is our responsibility, to carry this torch and to preserve that sacred fire of liberty. It is not a responsibility we should shy away from. It's a responsibility that we should welcome, because if not now, when? And if not us, who? I'm asking for your support on Monday in the Iowa caucus. As a candidate, I'll work hard to make sure Republicans win up and down the ballot in November. As a leader, I'll always be somebody that you can be proud of, and as your president, I will get the job done, and I will not let you down. Thank you all. God bless. All righty. Anyone got any questions? Yes. Ma'am. We are going to deport them, and you use all the assets that you have. Part of that is those assets are not being deployed to do that right now. They're being deployed basically to process more illegals coming into the country. So we will have more resources once we stop the illegals coming into the country. Another thing you have to do is crack down on states that are sanctuary states and then there are sanctuary cities. I mean, it's ridiculous that they will not cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. I mean, even in the extreme cases, so I did this debate against the governor of California a couple months ago, Gavin Newsom. I researched some of that because they're a sanctuary state. Places like LA are sanctuary cities. You know, they had a guy in jail in LA, multiple deportations, huge criminal record. ICE had a detainer to take him so that he could be deported. The LA refused to work with the federal government, so they just released him, not honoring the detainer. What did he do? He killed a mother of a 3-year-old child. And it's like, you know, this is enough. So we're going to use all levers, all resources to be able to do it. But I think if we don't do it, then this problem is going to continue to persist year after year after year. So removing the incentives, I think, complements having the interior enforcement. But we're going to do it. Yes.
Governor DeSantis, Governor Reynolds, thanks for braving the blizzard this morning. It's something. So I've heard you just talk about immigration, which I greatly appreciate. What I have been thinking here is in terms of choosing for national security, with Putin weaponizing immigration, destabilizing countries, sending those flows of immigrants to the EU, to our borders, I really feel the fight for Ukraine's borders and our southern border is one fight. So I really would like to engage you here and hear more about how, having just quoted Reagan, Kennedy, Gorbachev, you will stand up to Putin and defend our American interests in Ukraine.
Our southern border is not the same issue as that, with all due respect. I mean, our southern border is an issue of intentional neglect by Biden and a failure of Donald Trump to do what he said he would do in his first term by building the wall, by having record deportations, and by doing the interior enforcement that he promised. So you have to do that. There are people from Russia that have come, but there's been people from over 100 different countries, the Middle East, Iran, China. Anyone that wants to harm our country is going to use that border because it's a vulnerability. Biden is somebody who has invited a lot of conflict in this country or around the world with his weakness because people don't trust that he will follow through on anything. His energy policy benefits Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela. I'm going to repeal his energy policy, the Green New Deal. We're going to be energy dominant in this country again, and that's going to have a huge national security impact. What Biden is doing, though, he's flushing hundreds of billions of dollars. They want another $100 billion to do things like pay pensions for the bureaucrats in Ukraine, to pay salaries for Ukrainian government officials. How is that something that is in our vital national security interest? No one even knows where that money is going. So he has totally mismanaged this, and I think the next president needs to come in and bring an end to this conflict and not have a forever war that costs this country hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars more. Yes, sir.
I'm Wayne from California. Thank you for being a conservative vision.
You live in Iowa now, or you're visiting from California?
California.
Okay.
I admire your ideas about foreign education.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Before you get elected, would you have confidence in the elections if there's no election integrity, as you suggest in some states?
Well, in Florida, we have confidence because we have good election integrity. I think they do good in Iowa, too. So I think there's a lot of states that do good. Some don't do as well. I'm not just going to sit there and complain about it. I'm going to do whatever we need to have organizations unique to each state that is going to mitigate any shortfalls. For example, ballot harvesting. I think it should be banned. It is banned in Florida. It's not banned in a place like Nevada. They mail everybody a ballot, and then the Democrats go and harvest ballots. I think that's wrong, but if that's legal, we have to do it. So we're going to have harvesting in a place like Nevada, and I'm not going to fight with one hand tied behind my back. Zuckerbucks, we will do that in states where that's legal. We banned it in Florida. I think it's ridiculous. Zuckerbucks he put hundreds of millions of dollars into these nonprofits, and what they would do is they'd go to election offices, like the places that administer the elections. They'd flood it with money. Here's money. And then they'd bring in their people, and they'd basically run the election in a way to benefit Democrats. Not the way. You shouldn't be doing that, but if it's legal, we're doing that. So yes, I'm not fighting with one hand tied behind my back. On education, there are certain things that we would have done in Florida that is a state prerogative that the federal government should just stay out of. But then there's other things that we've done in Florida which can be applied federally. For example, we have universal school choice. We're going to do school choice nationally through corporate tax credits. So it's not going to have anything to do with the Department of Education, which we want to get rid of, but it'll be done through the Treasury. But basically, we'll be able to say corporations can write off a certain amount of their federal tax liability. It goes to a scholarship entity that administers these scholarships, and then families can apply. We did 100,000 kids with that approach in Florida for $1 billion a year, between administrative costs and scholarships. So if you think about that, I mean, if you just did $25 billion, that would be nationwide. You would be able to do, millions of kids. And we could probably even do more than that. I mean, that's budget dust in Washington. And just think about it. You have some kid in Chicago that has no chance. All of a sudden now they have a scholarship, and that they can go to a school where they can potentially do well. So I think that's going to be a game changer. And in Florida, if you look, what's one of the biggest problems with K-12 education? It's the role that teachers unions play, because they're very partisan. They're using schools to try to promote agendas and indoctrination. They don't put the kids' interests at front. In fact, we saw that during COVID. Chicago Teachers Union they didn't want to have kids in school at all. Los Angeles. And then you'd see them, they'd be out some of the union people would be out, going to the Bahamas, living their best life while these poor kids suffered. So people saw that, and they realized in Florida, we beat them on school choice, we beat them on COVID, and we just did paycheck protection. No automatic deduction of union dues for teacher unions. So teachers can write a check or pay, but they can't just have the dues deducted or even just have an authorization form. That is now causing a lot of teachers to bail on this because, quite frankly, they realize it's not in their interest. I've done big pay increases for teachers in Florida based on me working with the legislature. It had nothing to do with these school unions. So I think liberating people from school systems that are controlled by those groups, I think is really, really important for the future of this country.
Thank you so much for being here, Dr. DeSantis. I guess my question is just as someone from a younger generation, how do you see passing on the baton for them, especially when it comes to LGBTQ issues, and how does your position differ from how do you see your role as president?
Well, I can't really speak to them. I mean, I think that the approach I take is simple. I treat people as individuals, not as members of groups. I think we need to get away from this idea of trying to put people in different groups. I don't think it's healthy for society. I also just think, I don't want to be put in a group because then people will say, oh, this group believes that, therefore that I have to believe that. And no, I'm an individual. I think people should do that. So it goes into a bunch of different things. For example, this whole DEI that they're doing at the universities. They say it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's really ideology. And it's ideology that's trying to aggressively divvy people up in different categories and different groups. We've seen in some of these universities with the fallout with some of the Jewish students how that line of thinking, people have linked that to some of the culture on campus, and I think that's probably true. The way DEI is actually practiced, it should stand for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination. It has no place in our public institutions, and so we got rid of it in Florida. I know Iowa is either got rid of it or in the process of getting rid of it. I think Texas has done that. So you have a handful of states that are doing it, but we are not going to go down the road of basically they say it's used to remedy discrimination, and so they are, to quote remedy, they are practicing discrimination. And that's just totally unacceptable. So we'll get rid of that across the federal government. And we will end the DEI cartel once and for all. And what's your name? Jessica. Thank you, Jessica. No, look, I think that's I think you put it perfectly. And actually, that's the approach we've taken in Florida. So, for example, and it's not just limited to low income, government can't solve these problems. That's obvious. I mean, we saw, in the 60s, they did a war on poverty. They said if they just spend money, that will end poverty. And what happened is they created a culture of dependency that caused problems. So it was a total failure. And other stuff that's been done just hasn't done. So what's the role? Government's role is there are certain things that it can do, but we've tried to use government in Florida to be a facilitator for resources that are outside of the bureaucracy. So, for example, my wife started something called Hope Florida, Pathway to Prosperity. So when you go in for, say, welfare benefits, yeah, you can just say, here, whatever the state can give you and do that, and then just keep coming back. But we know that's a dead end, right? So she created something called the Hope Care Portal. I know Iowa's working on this too. So we've invited churches, we've invited charities and nonprofits, we've invited businesses, we've invited even individual volunteers to be plugged into this portal. Someone comes in, maybe it's a mom who got evicted from her apartment, she's got 2 kids and she needs a place to stay. That goes. Now maybe government can help, but the minute that goes in, it goes out to all these other groups. Guess what? The churches spring into action. Maybe an individual just springs into action and do. So government is serving as a way to connect people to a lot of resources that are in our society, because people want to help their fellow citizen, but when people need the help, a lot of times they don't know where to turn. So we're going to do this, for example, the federal government, we're going to do it with veterans issues. The VA, I'm the only veteran that's running for president, and so I remember leaving active duty, getting a stack of papers about veterans benefit, and I didn't need anything, but I didn't understand what was in. I mean, it was bureaucracy. And it's a terrible bureaucracy. So people go into the VA, maybe they'll get help. A lot of times they don't. We'll have a portal where we'll have these veterans groups plugged in. We'll have charities. We'll have churches. We'll have businesses. We'll have individuals. And it could just be something, a veteran has post-traumatic stress that goes out. Maybe it's just one individual that gets out and says, you know what, that person lives in the neighborhood next to me. Shows up. Hey, I just want to make sure you're okay. Can I take you out to get lunch? Just doing that may avert a suicide. And then you have something where we have groups that train service dogs to be paired with veterans with post-traumatic stress. And it mitigates the symptoms, and the suicide rate goes down dramatically. And then there's so much in the private sector of people that want to help veterans in particular. So that, I think, is the role, is really being a conduit to some of these things. But if it's just a bureaucracy going in, that is not going to change the trajectory of any of these communities. Sir.
Good morning. As a native
Okay.
So my question is simply, I don't think the average citizen knows the challenge that the administrative state at a federal level has on, the impact it has on their life. I look at it from the perspective of the Medicare home health and hospice industry, and this is an industry that sees an additional 750 to 1,000 pages of new regulations every year. It keeps seeing their reimbursement cut every year. And just in the last week, MedPAC says, oh, we need to reduce benefits by another 20%. You remember when the Democrats ran that TV ad about pushing grant off over the cliff? Okay. It's already happening, but it's happening so quietly and so subtly behind the scenes from the administrative state.
Yep.
So the question is, how can your administration have a significant impact on this administrative state, not just in healthcare,
Yeah.
but all these
And your name is?
Randy.
And what part of Florida were you from?
St. Pete, you and I talked about that in Lake Wales.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, well, thank you. I think it's a great question. Honestly, it's a question that raises implications about who governs this country. Do we, the people, govern ourselves? Do these elections matter? Or are the elections just suggestions where an entrenched bureaucracy just does what it wants anyways? And I think the policies that are implemented by the bureaucracy oftentimes are very destructive policies. I mean, for example, in Iowa, they were fighting the waters of the United States. You have a puddle on your farm, someone can come in on the EPA and you're subject to federal jurisdiction. It's ridiculous. That's not what the people have ever enacted through Congress. It's bureaucrats run amok. These are nameless, faceless bureaucrats who nobody in this room has ever voted for or will ever be able to vote out of office. And so it's a massive amount of power that's basically been transferred from we, the people, to this effectively fourth branch of government. How do you deal with it? Well, one, you need a president that understands the problem. And, look, I mean, Donald Trump was president for 4 years. He did not make a dent in the administrative state. He did not make a dent in draining the swamp. That's just the reality. And in fact, he's now running saying he wants to build a $1 billion+ new headquarters for the FBI right smack in the middle of Washington, D.C. That isn't draining the swamp. That's deepening the swamp. So I would not do that. So I think you got to be focused, you got to be disciplined, and you got to understand this power is accumulated over many decades. They are not just going to give it up willingly. So you have levers of power at your disposal, and you got to pull those levers in a way that are methodical and strategic. For example, we tried to get Trump to do this, and he didn't do it until he tried to do it at the very end, but it was too late. You have about 50,000 bureaucrats that are involved in policy making. Well, they should not be in civil service. They should be a separate Schedule F where they can be fired at will. And so we're going to do that. Because if they're exercising judgment that affects your life, you've got to be accountable to the elected president of the United States. I also think we're going to use Article 2 power over the civil service as well. I mean, we can lay off folks. And I think so there's a size and the scope of government. Size, think about this. Florida, we have millions of more people than New York does. Our budget's half the size of New York. We have the lowest per capita state employees in the country, lowest cost per state employee in the country per capita. And yet, when people move to Florida from New York, they tell them, oh my gosh, your infrastructure's better, your schools, all their services. So we're doing it at like half the footprint. So much of the bureaucracy is just bloat that you can reduce, and you wouldn't miss a beat on actually doing the core things government needs to do. But then you also have the scope of government, which is them getting involved in all these other things. And some of that is like the weaponization that we've seen. You got to be willing to fire people. If an FBI agent is surveilling school board people, moms going to school board meetings, I'm firing those people. You fire the director when they're working with big tech to censor dissent. Clean house. You have to hold these agencies accountable when they exceed the scope of their lawful authorities. And so we're going to do that. But part of the reason the administrative state rears its head is because the Congress doesn't use the power of the purse to discipline it. They do continuing resolutions and omnibus bills. That's government on autopilot. That is not doing anything to really do. Like in Florida, for example, and I'm sure Iowa reacts quickly too to these things. We had an agency that was involved with combating domestic violence. So there was a nonprofit that they had basically contracted out to run it. And this had been a legacy for decades in Florida. I came in my first or second year as governor. We started getting reports that they were mismanaging the funds, lining the pockets of the directors, all this stuff. That news broke, took like 2 days to verify the reports. The next week, the legislature came in and zeroed them out, like done, right off the bat. That's how Congress is supposed to act. They're supposed to be very, very concerned about how the government's using its powers. And instead, what do these guys do? They'll go in a committee hearing and they'll complain. They'll go on cable news and they'll complain. They'll send fundraising emails and say, you need to support them so they can fight back. And did they ever actually do anything to change? No, they don't. Because they're scared. They're scared of having a government shutdown. They're scared of the media attacking. They're scared of all this. So Congress has been pretty much useless with respect to this issue. I'm going to really goad them to do more, because ultimately we're going to be able to do a lot from the executive. But depriving the bureaucracy of the funding when it's doing things that are contrary to our freedoms is very, very important. The Founding Fathers created 3 branches of government. We have a de facto 4th branch. I think the task of the next president, and it will take 2 terms to do this, is to have that 4th branch disciplined, constitutionally accountable, so it's now part of the executive branch again. And your votes for president mean that how the government operates will meaningfully change depending on who's in the Oval Office, and that's what they intended. Wow, favorite baseball memory. Well, you know, I think in terms of like me playing or just watching baseball. Okay. So my favorite memory of watching baseball was probably when I was in college. You know, one of my buddies was that I'd played with growing up. His dad was the manager of the Red Sox, so I got to go to some games. So I was at a game in Yankee Stadium. I think it was 99 or 2000, somewhere around there, 98, 99, 2000. Pedro Martinez against the Yankees. He struck out 17, 1 hit. A solo home run by Chili Davis. That was the only, he would have had a perfect game if not for that. Just absolutely lights out. That was kind of a pitcher at his prime and a Hall of Fame pitcher at his prime. So that was something, you know, that was really, really meaningful for us. In terms of, you know, things that I've done, I mean, you know, I played all the way through college. You know, you have some good memories and some failures. But I would say probably, you know, back in Little League, we went to the Little League World Series in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and it's just something there were only 4 American teams that would make it. It's a very difficult to get there. But you go there, and it's like a stadium for Little League baseball. Like it's like, I mean, it was like the Shangri-La for Little League. You go in, and it's just like, I mean, it was immaculate, and it was like, wow, you know, we're here kind of making the big time. And I think at a young age, it made, you know, a big impression. Now, you know, as you get older, to me, like some of that stuff, you know, isn't necessarily like I'm more interested in like just being with my kids or something like that than necessarily. But at the time, it was really, really, really significant. So we had that, and that was something that you always remember. And people, so when I was there, we played, you know, you played 3 games. I pitched the second game, and people have dug up the stats somehow of that game, and they were like, you know, he struck out 12 people, he got 4 hits, including a home run and 7 RBI. So I did hit a home run on that Howard Lamity Stadium, the Little League Taj Mahal. So. Well, let me give someone else a shot. Yes. Well, that's a great question. So there's a debt clock in New York City where it shows the debt climbing up, famous clock. One of my buddies who's a congressman, he created a version of that you can put on your coat, your jacket pocket. and he wears it on the House floor. So you see the debt going up. He's an engineer, so he figured it out. He gave me one, and I said, that's nice. I was like, could you do one for the state of Florida? Because if you did one for Florida, it wouldn't be counting up. It would be counting down, because we've reduced our debt, paid off 25% of our state debt just since I became governor. I mean, that I think is kind of the approach that you want to do it. You got to be willing to use the veto pen when they're spending too much money. And I look at COVID was, from the 21st century on, it's not been a great trajectory, but COVID kind of just did. They used COVID as a pretext to just shove a bunch of money out that they knew they couldn't do under normal circumstances. And so massive debt, starting with Trump, and he did $4.2 trillion just in his last year. Then Biden did 1.9 and other stuff. But what they've done is they basically just kept those levels of spending where those were never justified to begin with. And so you have to go back to where we were before that and then freeze that in place for the non-defense. I mean, I think that would save hundreds of billions of dollars. I think you have to do that. The other thing is I think you need structural reform. Part of the reason Florida, we've been able to pay down the debt is I have a balanced budget requirement in the state constitution. So you go in, there's not even a question about running a debt. Like you have to balance the budget. The other thing is I have a line item veto. They put a budget on my desk. I can veto individual items out. I vetoed 3% of the budget one year, $3.3 billion. I wouldn't have been able to pay down as much debt had I not done that. So you have your money is being spent on things like promoting transgenderism in Bangladesh. Like, is that really something that your tax dollars should? But president gets a big, massive bill, and you can fund everything and sign it, or you can fund nothing and veto it. So the incentives are to pack as much nonsense into there that the congressmen want, knowing that the vehicle's going to go and you're going to get that. Having that line item veto for president, I think, would be important. So balanced budget requirement and line item veto, that can be done through the states, and Florida has already done things like that. And then I think you need term limits for members of Congress, because what happens is their main goal is to stay in office. Like, that's just it. Well, if that's your goal and you're trying to deal with fiscal, borrowing is the best way to stay in office, because if they reduce spending, there are constituencies for the programs. Some people may get mad at you. Obviously, if you raise people taxes, they're going to get really mad at you. So they're always going to want to just do that. If you're term limited, I think, and I've seen this in Florida, people are thinking, okay, I'm here for 3 terms or whatever. I want to have something to show for it. I want to leave a legacy. I know I'm not going to be here for the next 20, 30 years. So I think they're willing to make better decisions. I think in Florida, it's shown having term limits has been a big benefit. So I think there are things in the long term. The incentives in Washington are hot-wired to produce the results we have right now. And I can sit there and tell you I'll offer better leadership, and I will, and it will make a difference. But is that going to be enough for 30 years, 40 years down the road? I think we got to have some structural change so that we're changing the incentives of how Washington operates. Yes, sir.
So with that, you have an implemented for entitlements. That is a lot of what that is seemingly untouchable, but eats up a lot of budget.
Well, you know, and this is one thing that I've heard from every part of Iowa when I've been visiting folks is, you know, something like a Social Security. I mean, I know that it's not an entitlement. You've paid into it. Every paycheck you ever earn your entire life, you get hit. No matter how little you make, you get hit for that. And so people work, and that's decades paying in every paycheck. And so I think, like, when you get to be 60, 65, you know, and beyond, people are just like, hey, wait a minute, you know, I paid into this, and so I have a right to expect to have some benefit. So that's kind of how I view it. I think people have been taxed a lot for this. I think Congress, because the programs used to run massive surpluses, and Congress would take the surplus and they would spend it on other things. And if they had just not done that, you would have no problem with those programs at all. In the short term, I think the one thing with Social Security is get the inflation and the interest rates down. Because what happens is when prices rise, they do a cost of living adjustment, which costs more from the program, but it is not enough to keep up with the rise in prices. You're better off having no inflation and a lower cost of living because the dollar actually goes farther there. It's also better for the sustainability of the program. And then the other thing in the near term is we have not had economic growth consistently above 3% since before the great financial crisis. And when you're growing, Florida is a great example of this. We grow. We have some of the best GDP growth, I think the best of any large state. If we were a separate country, we'd have some of the best GDP growth in the world. But what we do is we have a good environment for investment and business. We're number one in new business formations, but we're cutting taxes every year. I mean, I've cut taxes more than any governor by far, and yet we are expanding our economic base. We're growing, so that leads to a gusher of revenue coming in, massive surpluses, and that's why we're paying down debt at the rate that we're doing. So it's a virtuous cycle of where good policy leads to good economic results, and then the government fiscal is much easier to manage. In the federal, they have not grown at 3% plus, and so they're just not getting the type of benefits that Florida is getting when you're doing that. So you got to grow more. That means open up energy for production so we lower energy costs. It means get the administrative state off the back of the economy. It means tapering the spending down, of course. It means doing things that are going to be conducive for a high growth environment. But we've not had a great run in terms of GDP growth, and I think we got to do a lot better.
Last question, folks.
Sir. Yep. Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of areas you do that. I mean, transportation and infrastructure, for example. I mean, people pay taxes, that are supposed to go directly to that, and then you send that to Washington, and then you get back. Leave that here in Iowa and let them administer that. The money would go way further, and I think it would be more intelligently applied. So I'm definitely supportive of that. Ways to devolve power out of Washington, I'm going to be favorable for that. I mean, I just think that that's the nature of it. Now that'll mean that California may spend it in ways that I don't necessarily agree with, but I think ultimately voters get what they ask for in that regard, and so I'd much rather have power out of Washington. I think it makes more sense. And so there's a number of different, I think, areas where we could do that. I think it'll be really, really effective. Hopefully we have, with me as the nominee, I view politics, it's just a team effort. It's not just about you. We'll work very hard in these Senate races and in the congressional races because we need to increase the majority in the House, and we need to win 5 or 6 Senate seats, which is doable. Not doable based on the performance of 2022. I mean, what part of the reason I'm running is because I looked around the country after the election of 22. We were supposed to have a big red wave, and there may have been one here because of Kim, and there may have been one in Florida, but that was few and far between across the country. And we were in a situation where we had the best conditions to run in that we've probably ever had in 40 years. Unpopular Democrat president, inflation raging out of control, high energy prices, open border, crime in the inner cities, international turmoil, and it's like any Republican with a pulse should have been elected in that environment. And yet, the Democrats ran a playbook focusing on the past, focusing on the former president, focusing on these things, and that really caused us to come up far short. We should have won 240, 245 House seats. Instead, we barely had the majority. And a lot of that is because New York and Florida each added 4 seats. The rest of the country, just didn't do what it wanted to do. We obviously have to do better there. And it is a team effort, and you don't want to have a presidency which is just limited to doing executive orders. First of all, you're limited in what you can do with executive orders. But then second of all, the next president comes in, just like when Biden came in, he reversed everything Trump did on day one. Up in smoke. You got to get stuff through Congress so it has staying power, because once you do it, it's much harder to undo. An executive order can be undone usually at the stroke of the pen. Now, you have a two-term president, which I think we need. That stuff does take hold over an 8-year period in ways that does make it harder for a subsequent, even on an executive order basis. But still, you got to get it through the Congress. And so we're going to be doing that. And I think we have great opportunities across this country to be able to get that done. And I would just say, in terms of, you look at the different stuff with, with how a general election would work out. Everyone who's running has an election track record, right? Donald Trump, Haley, me. And I've always overperformed whatever polls said. My election last time was the best victory any Republicans ever had in the history of governor's races in the entire state of Florida. We were winning urban areas, we were winning suburban areas, we were winning all different categories. That's showing you that it can be done. People weren't predicting that we would do that. The pundits, they were, in their own world, but we knew what we were doing, and we were able to deliver. My fear with the former president is there's just so many people that are dug in against him that even if they agree with us on policy, they're just not going there. They have that. We need to get everyone that's open to walking away from leftist policy, and I think that's a big majority of this country, but we need every vote that we can get, and we don't want to leave any of these votes on the table, and so I think I provide the best opportunity for that. So again, I'll ask you for your support on Monday. I know it's going to be cold. I know it's going to be not the most pleasant, but I don't think you'll ever be able to cast a vote that has more impact given the circumstances. We don't know what the turnout's going to be. It could be much smaller than what it's been in the 16 cycle. That's possible. So if you're going out and you're bringing 4 or 5 different friends with you or family members, that is going to pack a punch in a way that voting in a general election just simply would not at that level. So I'd encourage you to be a part of that. We're asking you to caucus for us and bring as many people that you can. One thing I can say is that in Florida, I'll have people come up to me who didn't support me in the primary for governor in 18, and they'll say, "Yeah, I got that one wrong. You've done a great job. I'm glad you won the primary." Or people that did vote for me in the primary would say, "I liked you. I knew you would do a good job, but you've done so much better than anything I could have imagined." Don't we want somebody that will over deliver rather than under deliver for a change? Thank you all. God bless.
Well, I know what's right.
along the dusty Winnemucca Road when along came a semi with a high-end canvas-covered load. If you're going to Winnemucca Mac, with me you can ride. And so I climbed into the cab and then I settled down inside. He asked me if I'd seen a road with so much dust and sand, and I said, listen, I've traveled every road in this here land. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. Of travel I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla. I'm a killer. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. Travel I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. I've been to Boston, Charleston, Dayton, Louisiana, Washington, Houston, Kingston, Texas, down to Monterey, Faraday, Santa Fe, Tallapoosa, Glen Rock, Black Rock, Little Rock, Oskaloosa, Tennessee, Chicopee, Spirit Lake, Grand Lake, Devils Lake, Crater Lake, the Beach Lake. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. Of travel I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. I've been to Louisville, Nashville, Knoxville, Omaha, Shepardville, Jacksonville, Waterville, Costa Rica, Pittsfield, Springfield, Bakersfield, Shreveport, Hackensack, Cadillac, Fond du Lac, Davenport, Idaho, Jellicoe, Argentina, Diamantina, Pasadena, Catalina, see what I mean? I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. Of travel I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. I've been to Pittsburgh, Parkersburg, Gravelburg, Colorado, Ellensburg, Rexburg, Vicksburg, El Dorado, Larimore, Atmore, Haverstraw, Chattanooga, Chaska, Nebraska, Alaska, Opelika, Baraboo, Waterloo, Kalamazoo, Kansas